Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. What's going on, Baron? What's up, Robster? Arnold, what's going on, dude? What a nice green day. Okay, I take that back. That was a pretty ugly day. Unless you were in Tesla calls. Oh, good evening, Tom. Tom, nice to see you. Aren't you? Shouldn't you be in the hospital or something? What's going on, Hotch? What's going on, KJ? The beautiful thing was that the moment that I decided to go on live was the moment that Nasdaq decided to just wet the bed. That was just a beautiful sign right there. I think that had to be a beautiful sign. What's going on? How did everyone's trading day go? I want to know if everyone was green or red. Myrna was brutal. I can imagine. I was expecting Myrna to hold up this morning, and right when I was about to look to get into it to see if it would hold up, I was like, "Oh, hit the brakes." Curlew air brakes. Yeah, I definitely hit the brakes today because I definitely didn't get into much positions today at all. Opened red, turned green. That's a good sign. I mean, you definitely like that. Red minus 220. It's not that bad. You can bounce back from that. Ouch, down 3K. Okay, that's a rough one. Especially with the turmoil that's going on right now. All I can say right now is that if you are down, don't try to force the situation. Especially going into tomorrow, when a day when it's going to be probably a roller coaster. We can open up, pretty red and then go just straight moon, depending upon what Powell says. And so tonight's going to be pretty light as far as charting because, again, tomorrow's going to be just a wild card type day. You know, if Powell says what the market wants to hear, then the EW traders, they're pretty much going to have their way with their bull counts. If Powell doesn't say what the market wants to hear, then those EW traders, they're going to have their bear counts pretty much ready, right? So that's going to be the wild card. And so the charts that I'll present pretty much mega cap tech. I do have, those higher points and then the lower points, depending where the market direction is going to take us tomorrow. All right. I believe he talks around 11:30 in the morning. If I'm not mistaken, Tamikaze, correct me. But pretty much starting off with S&P futures, which is actually still holding up pretty much compared to Nasdaq, which we'll get to. But I actually defined my channel a little bit more better today. It actually told right into the point of where we wicked off on that high point going into today. And so now if we dial into the smaller time frame, which I know that Avery has somewhat of a picture of that, and Tamakaze also has that same image, is that head and shoulders that we have on a micro level here. You see that left shoulder right there. You see that right shoulder in which we're dragging down now below that neckline. And if I draw that neckline, it will be right around this level. And I can put that into a brighter color so you get that idea. And I'll zoom in there just a little bit so you actually get that idea here. So you see that left shoulder as it curls, you see that head, you see the right shoulder as we broke the neckline right now, in which we are going to get that more of a little bit more of a downside movement, likely get down to that 441 level and test that before we get the retest of the neckline, and then likely get that downtrend push. All right into the morning, in which Powell coming into the market is likely going to spook the markets. So don't be alarmed at the fact that, we do open down pretty red as you see Nasdaq down right now. It may not be the flip that we saw yesterday. I wouldn't bank on that. Yeah, we saw futures just mooning yesterday, and we were all saying that pretty much. The next thing you know, we just nosedived. All right. So this is the scenario that I'm looking at right now. Of course, I do have all my levels charted out that I'm looking at. And let me get back out to the daily. Pretty much my first level I'm looking at is getting down to just around that 440 level. Next level I'm looking at is around the 432-ish level, 4321. And then I do have that box down there, which if it does get really ugly, then I have that there. But the key part is noticing is that we retested the channel. That's the key part to understanding right now. And so the downtrend is real. If we do get, some kind of bullish sentiment from Powell, then we'll likely get close enough to that resistance and where we'll chop for a while until the market sentiment changes. and we see, it could be the debt ceiling that causes that. It could continue to be the 10-year yield that causes us to go back down. But overall, if we get a bullish sentiment from Powell tomorrow, we'll see a closer push towards that would be about 447, 448, in which we're right next to that resistance of the channel. And so we'll chop around there until likely that yield or be the debt ceiling actually brings us back down. Okay. So that's S&P futures. Nasdaq, pretty much we're still intact with the head and shoulders that we have on this expanding wedge. And so right now we had, if I dial into a smaller time frame on that right shoulder, I think 2 hour probably looks a little bit better. Let's get down to the 2 hour. So as you see here, you had that rising wedge. We broke that rising wedge. We haven't retested that rising wedge yet. And so now we're just breaking, which looks like a bear. We're just bear flagging right now, pretty much. And so you do have that support of the rising wedge, which will be really badly. That will be a bad hit. But I did have those upper band levels that I'm looking at. 15,384 was the level I was looking at above. And then we're just about near that level, that support level that I was looking to crack, that 15,139 on NASDAQ. So it's not going to look too pretty. Next level, let me see if I can actually look at the next level that for NASDAQ. And I could probably use the same trend line. I'll use that same one. Let's see where our next level that I'm looking at. I think we're looking at close enough to this level right around here. So close enough to, yeah, right around that 1500 mark would be where our next level of support is. So touching right into that 15,000 mark would be that next level I'm looking at cracking for NASDAQ before we get down to that support level of the wedge. All right. So that's that. Let's get into mega cap tech stocks, starting with Amazon, the beast itself. I'll pull out, this is that descending wedge that we have. As we saw, we have pretty much a straight line up that it was. I know a lot of people were holding, some people were holding Amazon calls for the weekend. It didn't work out too well. And so we saw, looks like a reversal candle that we have here. But I do have that support level, as you see that line right in the middle here, 33.81. If we do end up getting that push, hopefully following Powell tomorrow, then I'm looking at 34.45 right into the resistance of the wedge. All right. So those are those two levels that I'm looking at particularly. Moving on, I do also have Google. If we remember, actually as well, since we're pretty much in the downtrend, just keep in mind, this is a beautiful ascending channel on Google. But when this support breaks, that is going to be a beautiful short right there. I will say that. So just keep that one in mind. But going back to the actual little wedge that we have, similar to Amazon, which I think is kind of similar to pretty much all the mega cap tech stocks, except for maybe Facebook and Netflix, if I'm not mistaken, which I'll get to a flash of that. But same scenario with Amazon in terms of pattern. Upper level that I'm looking at, if we do get the push, is 28.48. My lower level support that I'm looking at is 27.65 if we do see that continued downside. And if I actually dial down on Google a little bit more, maybe about the 30, you see you have a little bit of a head and shoulder action going on. So that's likely telling me that we're going down to that support level. So keep that in mind. So that one's I'm leaning more bearish on rather than Amazon per se. Next one I have, of course, is the beast itself. Also is Tesla, which everyone. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of people that are actually holding Tesla calls right now. I'm actually interested. Anyone in the chat actually holding Tesla calls right now? Because I don't know if you really want to see this chart necessarily, right? So right now we pretty much hit the resistance of what I would say is my rising wedge, right? That resistance, if you notice, you actually hit it down here. You wicked off on that wick, right into this wick, and now you just wicked off right into that resistance, right? So I'm inclined to say that this is going to get a healthy pullback. And I mean healthy in terms of, yes, you're going to get that next leg higher. It's not going to be, if no, say Amazon and the rest of the mega cap tech stocks just flush. I'm expecting a healthy pullback. As we saw, it held up despite the market just flushing today. So that will be a healthy pullback in which it pulls back to 769. right around that range, 771 to 769 is that $2 to $3 range that I'm looking at. That it ends up pulling back, and then we get that push right into around that 804 level. If we break the resistance of the rising wedge, then I'm looking right into 838 as that next resistance level that I have. Okay. Now, if we end up breaking the support for any reason that there's weakness, in which likely after the delivery report is when I'm expecting for Tesla not to do so good. Remember, it's pretty much going to be, it could be a sell the news event in which we're hyping up the delivery numbers, but once the delivery numbers come out, it may not be so pretty. Okay. And so if it breaks the support, and that's an if, then I have 724 as my lower end target to play puts. Okay. So that's just a bigger image, kind of paints the image in terms of the fact that now you know you're at resistance. So keep that in mind, in which case you're expecting a healthy pullback for that next push. Okay. Next one is Netflix. And Netflix is actually one that I really liked. And similar to Tesla, despite the market conditions, this just looks bullish. You see a nice little left shoulder, a head, and the right shoulder inversed. Okay. And so my target was 598 to get over that. Then we're looking at those highs, due to market conditions. I got to see it break that 598 to determine my next target. That ballpark number was 600 was the overall target to break. But right now with these conditions, I got to see it break that 598, and you're likely going to get a retest. In which then at that point I'll get a better analysis of what my upside target is beyond that. If we end up breaking down, then I'm looking at 584, which I anticipate will be a healthy pullback. That 584, which I didn't draw the trend line, but it's right around this level of where you see my cursor, in which that could still be a healthy pullback and still push this neckline to the upside. And so I'm watching this one. If it holds that 584, I may get into calls on Netflix here. This is one that's actually very interesting to me. So I'll watch this one going into tomorrow. Hopefully it doesn't break below that level because I really do want to get into Netflix. And so that'll be one that's pretty much on top of my watch list tomorrow. All right. I just threw in MasterCard actually. I don't know exactly why it was, but I know that I was watching for continuation. We had this massive wedge that we broke out of, and this was going on for quite a few days. It had that little choppy movement right into the resistance, and we just blew off. And I think that kind of went under the radar. I don't think anyone really spoke about it much, but now we're at an interesting point where it's actually a head and shoulders. So you see that left shoulder, you see that massive just spike on the head, one candle up, one candle down, and now we're at that right shoulder. So we're going to drop below that neckline, below that 356 level. We're looking to come down to 353. If we end up holding that neckline for whatever reason and we push back up, then I want to see a break that 359 level, and that'll determine the continuation for the upside. All right. And then I also have Facebook. Facebook similar to Tesla, in which case it does have that rising wedge formation. So I am looking for 357 on the upside to break that resistance level of it, in which that's really going to cause us to rally, and we're really going to likely end up filling this gap that we have in that lower 360 range. Or if we end up breaking that support, in which Powell's really going to just kill the day for us, then it'll go down likely to 347 level that I have for support. Okay. So those are the two scenarios. As you notice, I'm giving you scenario A and B pretty much for each ticker because, like I said, Powell is going to be that wild card that determines that pretty much that directional move for the market, in which we end up having a bull count or we have a bear count for EW traders. Okay. Let me see what else I have. If I'm not mistaken, Avery has some kind of position in Square. I'm not certain what it is, but I'm looking also at an expanding here. What's interesting here is that you're actually right at support. So if it ends up holding the support, I'm looking to fill this gap in which that's going to complete at that 266 range, and that will be my upside. If for whatever reason we end up cracking the support, then I'm looking at 251 for that support, that first support level. Okay. But this one definitely, I do like the spot that it's in. It's just that going into Powell, I didn't feel too comfortable actually swinging calls on this. Otherwise, likely to be honest with you, I probably would have. Because the fact that you have two gaps, you have one here and you have another one, you have a pretty defined downtrend right at support. that's just one of those scenarios where it's a picture perfect no risk reward ratio, in which you also have that little bit of a double bottom here, if I'm not mistaken, also, which I just now noticed. Yeah, you actually have a nice little double bottom formation right here at that 355 level. So that's also another indication that this is likely going to push higher. But again, if markets decide to just crash down, your upside's pretty limited, and it's maybe it chops here in this zone if you're lucky, until the market decides to push higher. Okay. Let me see what else I had highlighted. Did I have anything else highlighted? No, I didn't have anything else particularly highlighted. So those are the ones that I just wanted to key in, the major mega cap tech stocks, pretty much those that were really highlighted for the most part today. Of course, Tesla showing that momentum. Let me see what else actually showed momentum for the most part. Of course, UPST was up there, but it gave back most of its gains. So I'll just throw that one in there to show you pretty much where you're at this standpoint. You're pretty much right near where support is. So that's why you saw that bounce on UPST. You're right on near support of this expanding wedge. And so I understand why it popped now. Does that mean it's necessarily going to push all the way to 350? It depends. If market does go bullish, I'll be here for the ride. But if market does not, then it's likely that this is not going to play out too well. The other thing that concerns me a little bit, actually, just noticing this now, is that I do see a little bit of a head and shoulders formation, which I just now noticed. So let me paint it out for you. And so you actually see what I'm looking at. I'll put it in I'll put it in yellow. So you see what I'm looking at, in which this is pretty much your head. And I'm just gonna expand that. I'll move it over just a bit. And now you're gonna see that right shoulder right here. So I actually just noticed that right now. I didn't really look at UPST that well. My chart was pretty much already intact. But as you see, you have that left head, you have the left shoulder, I mean. You have the head, and now you have that right shoulder. So that's not necessarily playing into the bullish side of things, in which we want to see that 350, but it's likely going to end up breaking that support. And then I do have my support level for the downside. I'm looking at for near the 320 mark. So 317 is what I actually have. And then if we end up breaking that, then you're getting close enough to that 300 mark is what I'm looking at. Why don't I have gaps? It's likely because it's probably a different time frame that you're looking at the gap. It all depends. Yeah, I mean, it all depends where the gap is on certain levels, right? So other than that, that was one that I just thought I'd throw in there. I think other than that, those were the names that were pretty much pushing. Babo, it was another one that we saw make a nice little push, but I'm not necessarily looking at this breaking the downtrend yet. Let's see if it broke the downtrend. Wow, it actually did break the downtrend. So what you're likely seeing now is going to be that retest, and then you'll see a continuation. And above this level of that 154 level is where you're going to enter right into that gap. It's going to make a strong push right into this gap fill, in which you're going to see this gap likely fill. So you'll end up with an upside right into likely into that 160 range if this ends up getting a continuation off of that retest and breaking over that 154 level. All right. Fire cycle, what's going on? Lowe's and Home Depot are breaking out. All right, I'll peep that for you. Let's see what I'm looking at. That is a beautiful chart, though. I ain't gonna lie. Let me get a bigger picture on the daily. Oh, that could be a nice, massive cup that it's in the process of making. That could be a beautiful cup right into that 345 range, and that would be a beautiful move that it will be making. Nice catch, Fire Cycle. I like that one. So that'll be a nice little cup right there formation that you'll be seeing. And then you'll actually see if it ends up making that handle right then and there. So that's a nice one to play. Fire cycle, I like that fire you bring. So definitely right into the cup, in which you play that right up to that 345 level. And that'll be a beautiful one to play. But that's just big scenario, yeah. With mega cap just sinking, you're looking for those down names. This is definitely one of those. to make that push, in which that's about a $3 and change move that you're looking at. Close enough to $4 actually. $4 and change that you're looking at for that upside. Infrastructure bill too also. I thought I saw something on my Twitter about that, about news for the infrastructure. I gotta take a look at it. If I see it, I'm gonna retweet it. But I thought there was news on that. And then let me just peep lows real quick. I did like this little wedge that it broke out of right here. I like that formation that it broke out of. That was definitely nice that it broke out of. So if you see this, that was a beautiful little wedge that it broke out of. Definitely beautiful right there. So what you actually end up having here is that you had a little bit of an inverse head and shoulder action. So you have that shoulder right here. You have a massive head. And then you have that right shoulder that curled right up. And it's likely going right into that high of that 215 mark. So that's a beautiful one to also play as well. The fire cycle just, I don't know where he gets the fire from, but I like it. Definitely like it. So you could play this one right into that high, right into that 215 mark, which would be about a $5 move. Kind of coincides to Home Depot. So they're close enough around the same moves to all-time highs there, around the $4 to $5 move. All right. Other than that, kind of wraps up the session tonight, guys. Stay tuned for Powell tomorrow. That's around 11:30 in the morning ish. That we'll see Powell start to talk, and then we'll see how the market reactions are tomorrow. Hopefully, yeah, loving the wick and lows. Those wicks are beautiful. Once it broke that wedge and you saw that one candle go out, if you would have waited for that inside candle to retest, that was a beautiful move right there. So you got in close enough to around 204, 205, hopefully down to 203 if you waited that long. And that was a beautiful move right into to over 210. Beautiful move right there. I like that one, fire cycle. But again, let's see what Powell does tomorrow. I think that's going to really shape the direction of the market short term to play out for the rest of the week until the 10-year yield or that debt ceiling plays a factor. Or even better yet, the infrastructure bill could also be some kind of mover in the market as well. So keep an eye on news for that. I'm going to check on my Twitter to see if there was some kind of news about that because I thought I saw something. And futures are not so bad just yet. Nasdaq only being down about 52 points, S&P down about 9 points. We're still holding up for the most part. We could potentially go green into the morning and open pretty much flat to green. I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up happening. And then the market's just going to chop around waiting for Powell. So that is a scenario that can end up happening. But the only thing is that if you notice when I showed you with S&P futures having that micro head and shoulders, that's the only thing that's a little bit more concerning, which I think it actually looked better on the 1 hour. This head and shoulders is a little bit concerning, in which that's likely going to play to the downside. So that's the only thing that's not in our favor as well. So if you're holding calls right now overnight, brace yourself. Hopefully you did some kind of spread, diagonal spread, debit spread, and that's going to minimize your risk factor. But other than that, stay strong. Stay away from some any emotions, I would say. And, stay tuned for what Powell says before you try to force a position at open tomorrow. All right, guys? Other than that, you guys have a good night. We'll see what does tomorrow, and we'll talk about it tomorrow then. All right, guys?